Hi everyone, welcome to the second video of the channel. In this video I want to explain one of the most important concepts when it comes to the science of learning that I learned from the book Make It Stick. This concept is called the testing effect, which basically states that reading the same material over and over again, a study technique that many people is using today, is one of the worst ways to study something. Instead, something that we sometimes consider as not as a learning activity, such as doing an exam, is actually one of the most powerful methods that we have to remember things in the long term. So when we are doing an exam, we are usually thinking that this is because we need to get evaluated, which is also true. But after the exam, we actually understand the concepts that we were evaluated on much better. And to illustrate this, let me explain first how learning works in general. So basically, we have to distinguish between the working memory and the long-term memory. The working memory the is kind of the RAM of a computer. Is we can access this information much faster than our long-term memory, but we also forget it much faster. So if I give you a sequence of numbers, for example, 4793, you if I ask you this question right now, maybe you remember those numbers because those numbers are now loaded into your working memory. However, if I ask you this same question in 3 days, you probably don't remember those numbers at all because those numbers were irrelevant and therefore your brain decided to remove them from your working memory and to not encode them in the long-term memory. I'm not going to discuss a lot about the encoding part. This is basically your ability to relate the content you're learning to previous concepts that you already know, and basically depends how are you processing information, whether you think this information is relevant for you or for you or not. But what the testing effect is focusing about is in the retrieving part. We sometimes learn something, but if we don't retrieve the information that we learned, we are going to forget them because we are not going to be able to access them into our long-term memory. It's kind of looking the keys of our house. We have the house somewhere, but we forgot where the house is, and we don't have the keys to open the door. So this is why retrieving is very, very, very important. And why we have to understand now, we can now understand why many people is reading the same materials over and over again, is because and why this is not working, because they are loading information into the working memory and then using that information from their working memory, but they are not doing this part of here of retrieving the information. However, they feel like they are learning a lot, and they feel like they understand whatever thing they're reading because that information is in their working memory. So they feel comfortable by learning this way. However, it's a trap because, as I said, they are not retrieving information properly. And I want to do an additional reflection about this topic. And we can actually use these concepts to know when to use large language models for our learning journeys. So maybe sometimes you don't know if it's a good idea or not to ask ChatGPT to tell you something that you are learning. So you have to ask yourself: Is this help? Is this avoiding me to retrieve the information from our long-term memory? Am I doing the effort to try to remember this information, or I'm just offloading this task to the model and to ChatGPT? If this is the case, you probably don't want to ask ChatGPT. You want to first try to do the effort of trying to solve the problem by yourself, or trying to remember this concept. However, when ChatGPT can be useful is when is in this encoding part. So if you ask ChatGPT to explain you a concept it can give you an additional point of view that you didn't consider, and therefore it can help you to understand the concept better, and therefore to be able to encode it into the long-term memory in a much more effective way. So I hope this has made sense to you, and that you have learned something new today. Probably you will need to retrieve this information. So try to remember tomorrow what you learned today. Don't rewatch the video over and over again, because that will be not very useful. And thank you for watching, and see you next one. Bye.